In the wake of rising tensions between the United States and several African nations, an unlikely figure has emerged as a symbol of defiance: Captain Ibrahim Traore, the transitional president of Burkina Faso. The 36-year-old soldier-turned-statesman has become a continental sensation, not just for his bold military leadership, but for his unapologetic stand against former U.S. President Donald Trump's controversial remarks about African nations. It all began with a phone call. On a quiet Tuesday morning, diplomatic aides at the presidential palace in Ouagadougou informed Captain Traore that a special request had come through a call from Donald Trump himself. The message was clear. President Trump wanted to speak directly to the Burkinabe leader regarding new visa restrictions being considered for African countries. The tone was stern, the purpose even clearer: to assert American dominance. But the call never happened. Captain Traore refused to pick up. To many, it was a diplomatic misstep. To the people of Burkina Faso, it was an act of quiet resistance. Earlier that week, Trump had appeared on a conservative talk show where he warned that African countries were becoming burdens to the American immigration system. He claimed that too many African nationals were entering the U.S. and overstaying their visas. As a solution, he proposed a blanket policy: a total suspension of visa issuance to African countries unless leaders clean up their mess. It didn't stop there. Trump went on to say that he was summoning all African heads of state to a round-table negotiation in Washington, D.C., to straighten things out. Most leaders issued formal acknowledgements. But not Traore. "My people are bleeding. I have no time for games." When pressed by local journalists about his refusal to take the call, Traore's response was direct and charged with emotion. "My people are bleeding. I have no time for games. Burkina Faso is at war, not just with terrorism but with a system that thrives on our weakness. If I abandon my people to answer a call that offers no solution, I'm not fit to lead." It was a statement that echoed far beyond the borders of his landlocked nation. To understand the gravity of Traore's words, one must understand what Burkina Faso has been facing. Since 2015, Burkina Faso has been trapped in a deadly conflict with extremist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Towns have been razed, civilians slaughtered, and millions displaced. Schools have closed, roads have become death traps, mothers bury their sons while fathers disappear into the bush either as fighters or casualties. When Traore took power in a 2022 coup, the country was at the edge of collapse. Young, fiery, and unusually grounded, he promised his people one thing: he would stand with them and fight alongside them. And he meant it. Since taking office, Traore has deployed troops to protect abandoned villages, refused foreign interference masked as aid, and pushed for regional unity among Sahel nations. So when Donald Trump summoned him for a discussion about visas, he saw it for what it was: a distraction from the real fight. They finance terrorists and call themselves allies. In a televised national address, Traore went even further, making bold accusations. Some of these powers that claim to be our friends are the same ones financing the weapons that kill our children. They offer loans with one hand and poison our soil with the other. They invite us to meetings not to help us, but to control us. Burkina Faso will not bow. Though he never mentioned the United States or Trump by name, the message was unmistakable, and the people responded. In marketplaces across Ouagadougou and Bobo-Dioulasso, citizens cheered his speech. Social media exploded with praise for the captain who said no. His refusal to answer Trump's call became a symbol of African dignity, a stand against imperial arrogance. "I have never been prouder to be Burkinabe," said Mariam Zongo, a university student. "For once, a leader is speaking for us, not for foreign applause." The international response was mixed. In Washington, Trump, never one to take rejection lightly, reportedly fumed. According to leaks from his camp, he described Traore as another little dictator playing big man. His aides warned of economic consequences if the Burkinabe government didn't learn how to cooperate. Meanwhile, several African leaders privately expressed support for Traore's stance but avoided public comment. Only the presidents of Mali and Guinea, both also under military leadership, openly applauded him. calling his actions courageous and necessary. In France, the tension was palpable. Relations between France and Burkina Faso had already soured after Traore expelled French troops from the country, accusing them of failing to curb terrorism. Traore had also cut ties with several French NGOs, accusing them of undermining national security. The European Union issued a cautious statement, urging dialogue and mutual respect between nations. But inside Burkina Faso, Traore's popularity soared. Born in 1988 in Bondoukoui, Traore was raised in a modest household. He studied geology before joining the army, where he rose through the ranks due to discipline and leadership. But it wasn't medals that defined his career. It was his choice to remain with frontline soldiers, even when he could have sought safety in the capital. "He's not just our president," said Sergeant Alain Somme, one of Traore's close military allies. "He's our brother in arms." This connection to the people has made Traore almost untouchable. While critics in the West call him authoritarian, his people call him protector. And so when the call came from Donald Trump, his decision not to answer wasn't just political, it was deeply personal. In the weeks that followed, pro-Traore rallies spread across African cities. In Bamako, youths waved Burkinabe flags and chanted slogans of resistance. In Accra, opinion pieces praised Traore for breaking the cycle of obedience. At home, Traore doubled down. He announced a new national policy. Burkina Faso would no longer depend on foreign aid tied to political manipulation. Instead, the government launched a campaign called Nafura Faso, loosely translated as Pride of Faso. Under this initiative, communities would receive local grants to fund farming, education, and healthcare, all from internally generated revenue and new trade agreements with non-Western allies. Trump, meanwhile, went on the offensive. In an interview with an American news network, he said, "You can't fix Africa with people like this guy Traore or whatever his name is. They don't listen, they don't cooperate, and then they cry foul when things fall apart. I've said it before, America first. We're not going to hand out visas to countries that don't respect us." The remarks only added fuel to the fire. In African intellectual circles, his comments were dissected as modern-day neocolonialism. On African Twitter, hashtags like #IStandWithTraore and #AfricaIsNotAfarm trended for days. Even critics of military governments found themselves reluctantly admiring the Burkinabe president's boldness. Diplomatic experts argue that Traore's refusal to take the call, though symbolic, will have long-lasting consequences. "This is not just about one phone call," says Professor Tierno Diallo of the University of Dakar. "It's about shifting the balance of power. For decades, African leaders have begged, bowed, and brokered. Traore is rewriting that script. It's dangerous, yes, but it's also powerful." And indeed, other young African politicians have begun citing Traore's approach as a blueprint for self-reliance. In Kenya, a rising MP quoted Traore in parliament. In Nigeria, activists called for a Traore doctrine, a policy of dignity-first diplomacy. The road ahead for Traore is not easy. Burkina Faso remains in crisis. Attacks still plague rural communities. Resources are thin. The economy is fragile. And with growing international scrutiny, isolation could follow. But for now, the people are with him. And perhaps more importantly, the youth are watching. "I don't know how this ends," said 19-year-old student Issa Wedraogo. "But for once, I feel like our country is not begging. We're standing." When Captain Ibrahim Traore ignored that phone call from Donald Trump, he didn't just refuse a conversation. He drew a line. A line between obedience and resistance, between image and integrity, between silence and speech. Whether or not history remembers him kindly will depend on what follows. But one thing is certain. In a world where African leaders are often caricatured as puppets or despots, Traore has carved a third path, that of a defiant, principled warrior leader willing to risk it all for his people. And in doing so, he has reminded the world that Africa too has a voice, a spine, and a story that is still being written.